that better?
Yeah.
Okay. So, good morning again. Thank you for being here. I see a few new faces. So if you aren't familiar with anything about Fulham, let us know and we'll talk about it later. Obviously, we're going to talk about agriculture and Valley Food Partnership. I wrote up this big thing so I can introduce Cally, and then I realized a while ago she flipped through her slides, and the very next one's the same thing I was going to say.
Very similar. Yeah.
So I'm going to let Cally introduce herself. Cally is a fifth generation Montrosian, farmer, long time. I know some of you have been here for a while, know the Hale name. We've been talking with Cally about the fact that her father, Steve, did our landscaping at our house 20 years ago. Yeah, and then of course we know her mother Betsy. You remember Betsy Hale. So I'm just going to shut up. Let's go talk. No, I went first. Those of you who were here last week, I talked to you about stone soup. Did anybody go do stone soup? Very good. Cally told me, I went to see her the other day. She said they were highly successful. How many things of soup did you eat?
We served 350 people soup and cornbread and salad.
Great.
We're in our community.
So great. Okay, Cally, take it away.
Perfect. Thank you so much. So there's a few of you looking at this picture when as you were settling in. This is my part of my property. It's actually part of a property my great-grandfather bought in the 1950s from another homestead family, and he built, there's a little white house up here, he built that out of narrow gauge railroad ties that he had salvaged from the narrow gauge railroad, which is right across the highway from our property. Today we're going to talk about the state of agriculture. My name is Cally Hale. I'll go a little bit more into my history and why I'm an advocate for agriculture in our valley, but these are big brown bales that we feed over winter to our grass-fed and grass-finished cattle herd, as well as our hogs and chickens and everything else that makes its way onto our property. But we do a mixture of round bales and as well as square bales. But who am I? I am a fifth-generation farmer rancher. My great-great-grandfather Carrick and my great-great-grandfather Belgard came to work on the Gunnison Tunnel project. They were both immigrants from outside the United States, but we'll talk a little bit more about why they came here in a little bit. And they were the foremans of the east and west portal of the Gunnison Tunnel. So they were leading the teams that were driving the tunnel towards each other. And ironically, their kids ended up getting married and became my great-grandparents. So I have a very strong familial tie to the Gunnison Tunnel. But I also serve, today I serve on the Colorado State Fair Board, and I represent the Western Slope when we have the state fair. I'm a certified educator for Holistic Management International, which was developed by Alan Savory. It's a regenerative mindset for agriculture that was developed in the 60s. For the last 3 years, I've been the program manager for Cultivating Farmers and Ranchers That Thrive, which is a beginning farm rancher training program to develop our beginning farm ranchers that we'll hear about in a little bit. And I serve on the planning committee for the Western Colorado Soil Health Food and Farm Forum. I actually have also just accepted position as the Delta County Conservation District Manager. So I wear a lot of hats in agriculture, and I'm very proud to say that I do. But I also represent Valley Food Partnership, which is a nonprofit organization here in the Valley. It was developed about 15 years ago by several different organizations, including the Western Colorado Food and Farm Coalition and Council. And we are a 501c3 nonprofit, so we are tax exempt. And our mission is to connect local people with local agriculture. We do that through several different missions. We're currently located in Olathe, Colorado, in the Region 10 business food business cultivator, which if you haven't had the opportunity to go see a commissary kitchen, I highly recommend. It's a really cool way to engage with how local businesses start and how food businesses start in our valley. Valley Food Partnership is the fiscal agent for the Montrose Farmers Market, and we just celebrated our 45th anniversary, last year. But we are actually lucky enough in Montrose to have a year-round farmers market. So if you're interested, this next Saturday is our last summer market, this next Saturday. And then we go into our holiday market and then into our winter market, which moves a slightly different schedule than we do during the summer, which is every Saturday. And the market has 4 goals: to connect local producers to our consumers, to support local businesses in building capacity, increase access to local nutrient-dense foods for families experiencing food insecurity, and community building. So these are all really huge parts.
I don't understand the number 2.
Support local
capacity building mean?
Capacity building means in agriculture and in food businesses, it's really hard to create a customer base and to start growing that customer base. The farmers market is a great way to utilize the skills of to gain that customer base and to introduce yourself to people. Capacity building is kind of a generalized business term for businesses, but when it comes to agriculture, it's about building a consumer base so that you can actually sell your product, as well as start making connections towards wholesale opportunities. So we actually, at the farmers market, do try to start training our vendors how to scale up into wholesale opportunities as well, which will, in the long run, hopefully provide them larger, more sustainable farm businesses. We also have a food access program called Local Pharmacy RX. This Pharmacy RX was developed in 2019 with the mission of having like doctor's offices and social services like Hilltop refer people, much like a doctor would refer you to a specialist, refer people with food insecurity towards this educational program that would help people facing food insecurity or hunger towards skills with developing cooking skills and also access to additional food dollars like Double Up Food Bucks, and we have specialized dollars for Pharmacy CRX as well that can be used to purchase local food at the farmers market, but also at like places like DeVries or Maddox food stands, things like that. The reason why we pair those food dollars with education is because it's all well and good to give somebody a spaghetti squash, but if that person doesn't know how to use a spaghetti squash, they're probably not going to cook the spaghetti squash. So we really try to emphasize that it's better to teach a man how to fish than it is to just give him a fish. That's the whole mission of Pharmacy RX, but it does help a ton of people. We're actually developing this to work in other ways, such as going into nursing care homes or assisted living facilities and helping our elderly population have access to healthy foods. We bring in those food items for them to buy in those places so that they, in assisted living and things, have access to that food, even though if they can't get out to those places to purchase them. The Valley Food Partnership, and this is very dark on here, but we are part of the coalition developing the Western Colorado Soil Health Food and Farm Forum. That is a very mouthy title. We call it FOIL in the office, but the forum was actually 2 conferences. It was Soil Health Conference and the Food and Farm Forum. It came together about 3 years ago, but overall both conferences are about 14 years old. And this is a huge conference in our region for leading edge technologies within soil health, within agriculture, and within the technologies that will bring a better landscape for farmers looking to have a better foundation of education in their back pocket. So it annually has it's sold out for the last 10 years, so it's a very competitive, but it's an intimate conference as well. So Valley Food Partnership is one of the collaboration that's with CSU, Rocky Mountain Farmers Union, and the Shabana Conservation District as well.
When is that in the year?
And that is in January every year. So, and it's at the Pavilion. So those tickets will actually be going up and be available next month in November. So one of our new additions, this is the spring of 2023, is a no-till seed drill. For those of you with small acreages, instead of tilling every year on your small acreage, a no-till seed drill actually will go over and it puts seeds in the ground without a need to till, which is a much better soil health practice. It actually will help retain water. It keeps a living root in your ground. So as we are faced with drought and other systems of weather that would make it harder for us to retain water, you can use new technologies like a no-till seed drill to put in cover crops, to seed property, and without creating that big dust storm that we have every year. We have a small one that we rent out I think it's $90 a day, which is very cheap for what these technology is, but these come as wide as 40 feet wide. So depending on how big of an operation you have. So even in commercial agriculture, soil health practices are becoming more regular. And the last one the one that I had the most impact with was cultivating farmers and ranchers that thrive. This program was a USDA funded program when it began, and it's over the last 3 years, we have helped over 60 farmers and ranchers gain a better understanding of their economic, their environmental, and their social foundation of their farm businesses. So we actually help them develop business plans. About 45 farms gained business plans in the last 3 years, which is huge because the first 10 years a farmer is in production is the most critical. If they most farms and ranches actually fail within 5 years. So it's really important that we support these beginning farmer ranchers. And we try to go in and make sure that they're set up because farms are businesses too. And we want to make sure that we're supporting those businesses the best we can. And some information about CFRT, just so you can see, we meet in class in person and we have hands-on work. There's again our no-till seed drill here as well. But we focus on holistic management, irrigation, water management, which is a huge thing in our valley, financing, lending, leadership, communication, community building, and mentorship. We have a huge mentorship pool where we try to connect and give beginning farm ranchers real life experience with really experienced farmers and ranchers. We pay both our mentors and our mentees to spend time together because time when you're a farmer is very limited. So we want to pay people for their time. But that was the kind of overview of Valley Food Partnership and the organization that I represent today. You can learn more about it on my little booth over here and sign up for a newsletter, which only comes out quarterly. We do put a recipe in there, so you get at least something out of it. So, but I'm really here today to talk about agriculture in Montrose. And this was one of the tours that we put on for our wholesale events. This is at Sandy Seed Farm. But today we're going to be going over a few things. We're going to set the stage about agriculture in general, ag in Montrose, challenges for farmers and ranchers, programs and organizations, and ways that you guys can get involved with local agriculture. Does that sound good for you guys? Perfect. So setting the stage. According to the USDA, and again we just had a big census, the average age of a farmer is 58 years old. It's the average. And that means within the next 10 years that most farmers and ranchers will be at or above traditional retirement age. What that also means is that within the next 10 years, we face a lot of farmers and ranchers at the point where they're ready to sell out and sell their properties, because that's in agriculture, that's really one of the only ways that you can get a pension, is to sell your land in some ways, unless you're set up with larger economic success or you have another income coming in. But this is the lack of, these people are coming in looking to sell their properties. We're going to lose a lot of farmland in the next 10 years. It's kind of scary. In 2022, the National Young Farmers surveyed over 10,000 farmers across the United States, including over 4,000 people who were under the age of 40, who are actual farmers and ranchers. And they found that the next generation are really eager to provide local, healthy food to our communities. They are really about advocating a healthy community in their who they sell to, and making sure that their communities have access to better nutrition. These are diversified people. Most of them have college degrees, and they're really into being socially active and being civically active. Like myself, they're engaged in boards. They want to be part of the political network in their communities, and they're getting engaged. So your farmers are the people who are stepping up into those civic roles that aren't necessarily being filled. The next generation of farmers is actually primarily female as well. So we're seeing a new generation of female farmers. 62% of our beginning farm ranchers are female. And most of them, 78% of them, do not come from ag families. They are first generation farmers and ranchers as well. 78% of them are rural, so they're not all urban farmers, but there is a large number of urban farmers who are developing farms on smaller and smaller acreages. And like I said, 78% or more are highly educated with at least a bachelor's degree. So that is, when you're thinking about it, I think because of cartoons and things like that, there's this image of farmers being uneducated, being dull, and things like that. That is not the actual reality of farmers. Farmers are smart and intuitive, and they are so endlessly creative. But, and that was on a nationwide scale. In Colorado, in general, agriculture accounts for $47 billion of Colorado's economy. That's a lot of money. So, and 32 million acres of land in Colorado is dedicated farmland. Montrose over here, but almost 39,000 farms and ranches exist in Colorado with almost 200,000 employees, and that includes farm owners as well. So ag in Montrose. Montrose County has over 1,000 farms in operation. And all the requirements of being a farm is that you make over $2,000 in revenue. That is not profit, but if you make $2,000 of values of zucchini in your garden, because a lot of us grow zucchini and then we have to figure out how to get rid of it, right? So you might be a farmer and not knowing. But there's approximately over 330 acres in production in Montrose County alone. The average size of a farm is 291, but this is a little bit, 291 acres, but that is a little bit, I would say this is a true average, because the majority of farms, as you'll see down here, there's a lot more farms in this 10 to 50 acres, 37% of those are into 10 to 50 acres, and there's a lot more up here in almost 500 acres. And so those average out to looking like a pretty reasonable farm acreage. But the majority of beginning farm ranchers are farming on less than 5. They're growing businesses on less than 5 acres. So agriculture is diminishing in size in the requirements of land, but that is not because it's needed, it's because of the price of land that is going up. For instance, I own on our family homestead. I live on the homestead along with my brother and his wife. My aunt and my father owns the property. We're a multi-generational homestead property. But I personally own 3 acres of our 300 acres. And that 300 acres with a small house, or that 3 acres with a small house on it, is valued at almost $200,000. That's just the land. That's before I put a house on it. So it's really hard for a beginning farm rancher who is going into an industry where the income might not be so high to afford buying just 3 acres to start a farm on, which is a huge impact and barrier for farming and ranching in general in Colorado, but also across the United States. And so what are farmers and ranchers growing in Montrose? That's a really important question. Our top crops are hay, feed corn, dry beans, and harvest vegetables. Harvest vegetables include Olathe sweet corn, onions, beans, things like that. Commodity crops. Our top animal products are egg-laying chickens, cattle, and sheep. We're 12th in the nation, or 12th in the state for agricultural sales. So out of all the counties, we're number 12. We're actually the second in the state for poultry and eggs. You wouldn't believe that. We actually have several egg houses in Montrose County that actually support a huge egg industry. We're 4th in the state for sheep and goats, and we actually send most of our goats abroad. We raise a lot of meat goats here in Montrose County, and that actually gets sent out to other states, and especially on the east and west coasts where we have more people who eat goat. But goat is actually the largest consumed meat animal across the entire world. We're 4th in the state for fruit, nuts, and berries. And we're 2nd in the state for trees and shrubs, mostly with the Christmas tree industry. So we actually support a very interesting Christmas tree industry in Montrose. And all of this is really possible because of the Gunnison Tunnel. So how many of you have heard the Gunnison Tunnel story? I would assume a lot of you. In 1902, President Roosevelt signed the New Lands Act, and this allowed for communities to apply for projects. And a coalition from Montrose went to Washington, D.C. and applied for the Gunnison Tunnel project. And that they went, and these were farmers and regular people and miners who just knew that if they could bring the water in a better system to the valley, we would actually be able to become a hub of production. And it got approved, so that flow of water actually feeds today 80,000 acres of Montrose is fed water, irrigation water, by the Gunnison Tunnel project. It's a huge amount of water. And that's over $3 million in revenue every year. Well, back then it was $3 million. Today it's over $552 million of revenue coming in from water that comes through that Gunnison Tunnel. So it is huge for this. This tunnel allows for Montrose County's biggest industry to flourish. And I say it's Montrose's biggest industry because our top 3 industries in Montrose, Colorado are government. So we have our government agencies, elderly care, which is something we should all care. We should care for our elderly people, and agriculture. Those are our top 3 in Montrose County. Those are top 3, which means agriculture is our true largest industry. And this tunnel made that possible. So when we think about remembrance, because we're coming into Veterans Day, we're coming into holidays and giving thanks and Thanksgiving, we should really be thankful that the bounty that we have and the success we have, the ability for us to have doctors and dentists and all these other jobs is really supported by the industry and this tunnel, as well as the Cimarron Ditch Company and other ones around that supplement the area as well. So, I talked about legacy in the past. These are things that the challenges for farmers and ranchers today. Before we get into this, because this is kind of scary, does anybody have any questions? Thoughts? Jokes? Okay, so, the number one face for this next generation of farmers and ranchers, because again, most farmers and ranchers are going to be retiring within the next 10 years, is access to land. Especially in finding funding for access to land. Access to capital. The number, almost 40% of farmers and ranchers found that it was very hard for them to access a loan at a favorable rate to be able to purchase land, even if they found an opportunity to buy the land. Healthcare costs. Farmers and ranchers are usually land rich, but they are revenue poor because the average hourly wage of a farmer is minimum wage, if not less. But because they own land, they do not qualify for civic and policy-driven programs like Medicaid or Medicare. So they are the number one uninsured population in the United States, even though we're feeding everybody else, right? So farmers and ranchers don't have health care. Even though they work with equipment, they're considered frontline workers. During the pandemic, as a farmer and rancher, I was allowed to get a vaccine first because I was a frontline worker in the eyes of the government. So, but even that so, I don't qualify for any tax breaks on my insurance. I still have to pay everything the same. The cost of production is huge today, especially after the pandemic. With the shortages, the cost of fertilizer, the cost of labor, the cost of everything went through the roof. I'm sure many of you experienced that just going to the hardware store to pick up, a hammer or a 2x4 or just a simple things that were needed around your house. Well, those costs have not come down, even though we're all back in working, we're all working again. And farmers eat a lot of those costs. It's also the cost of food is heavily monitored and regulated by the United States government. In New York, there's a my mother's side of the family. She came from upstate New York. And we don't have rodeo princesses back in the East Coast. We have dairy princesses. We talk about dairy industry. So I grew up also, along with learning about cattle and hay, I learned about the dairy industry growing up. And the cost of milk in the United States is actually subsidized by the government so that the cost of milk can never be above a rate. That cost is not actually subsidized. The farmers get a set amount, but that price has not risen in the last 20 years. And so these farmers are pushing their milk cows harder and harder and harder, and those cows have to stay in a stanchion all day to make enough milk to make the price of eating that subsidy affordable for them. So the animal then, their teats then are worked extra hard, they're not allowed out on grass, and the animal have a less quality of life. People who care about the quality of life of the animals should understand that with the price of everything else going up, you also have to pay a little bit more for your food. But we also should be paying our farmers what is equal. But the cost of production is a huge thing, so we're losing more and more dairies every day, but that also applies to other sides of agriculture as well. Dairy is just an easy example. Housing, cost of housing is crazy. I have a very small modular home that cost me $165,000. Like, as a single person, that's a huge, who works for a nonprofit, you can imagine how much of my pay goes to paying for this modular home. So, and I'm very lucky because I was given access to land. But you can imagine what that debt does for somebody who's new, starting out, wanting to help my community. And a lot of these people, like I said, almost 90% of farmers ranchers today are highly educated with at least a bachelor's degree. So that student loan debt is impacting us from having access to capital, which keeps us from having access to land. So this is the reality that a new farmer rancher faces today. And I don't tell you these things because I want to discourage you from helping encourage your people to become farmers ranchers. I just want to tell that this is what people my age and younger are facing when they want to come into agriculture. And they still do it. Because there isn't a farmer out there who doesn't care about their land or their community. So why should you support agriculture? Come to the penultimate moment about how can you help all of these things be better, right? There's lots of ways for you to support. Because it's better for everybody. Local food is better for all of you. Local food, time and travel reduces nutritional benefits. Today, and for the last 20 years of my life, we've all heard there's an obesity epidemic. I'm obviously a huge example of that. But people are not getting the nutrients that they need to survive. Well, a lot of that comes from the fact that we've built a food system that is bringing food, that is importing food from other places, and we're not eating food that's locally grown around us, which is because, for example, spinach, if for 24 hours, loses 50 to 90% of its nutritional value, mostly vitamin C if after it's been picked. So imagine this, you're going to the grocery store to buy a thing of lettuce, and that lettuce probably was grown. About most lettuce that we eat today here in Montrose is picked in Southern California, and then it's processed in a packing shed in Southern California, and it may or may not have been refrigerated during that process, and then it's put into a plastic container, and then it's put onto a refrigerated truck, and then it goes to 2,500 miles to a distribution plant in Denver, and then it's on another train or a truck and brought over here. So, in average, that container of lettuce from the grocery store has traveled 3,000 miles and probably spent about 72 hours or more, maybe up to a week since it's been picked. So, would the nutritional value of that lettuce still be what it was when it was picked? Probably not, just in general, scientifically. However, if you went to the local farmer's market and you picked up a bag of lettuce, those greens were probably picked that morning at 5 in the morning and put into a bag and rinsed and brought to you. And it may have traveled about 20 miles on average to that local farmer's market. And that probably has a lot more vitamin C and nutritional density, correct? We're nodding. Good. Okay. So, but that applies to almost all foods as well, because food that is grown near you, even animal products that are grown near you, eat all of the things and minerals and folic acids. They eat all the things that are in our community already, and that stays within our nutrient cycle. It also has a way smaller carbon footprint. The average American food travels at least 1,500 miles before it's consumed, and that's a ton of fossil fuels. And how many times a day do we eat? Probably about 3, right? Without counting all the snacks, right? So every meal, you're thinking about your carbon imprint. Well, every meal has traveled about 1,500 miles. So in a day, you're eating about 4,500 miles of carbon impact every day. That's crazy, right? That's crazy, right? But you know, when we get down to like thinking about things scientifically, wouldn't it be much better if we tried to mitigate that by eating one meal a day that was processed within 20 miles of you, right? So, and it supports local jobs. I worked when I was laid off in the pandemic. Like many of you, I worked in the travel industry. So you can imagine what 2020 looks like for the travel industry. So I had my Scarlett O'Hara moment. How many of you have watched Gone with the Wind, which is Vivian Lynch? Most beautiful costume design ever. Anyway, there's a scene, it's a halfway mark right before the intermission. We have to change the tape to the second videotape. I was that kid who grew up that way. It's after the Battle of Charleston. And she comes up, she's been gone through war, this big battle, and she comes up over this hill, she looks out, and there's her family's plantation. And she looks at it, and she's like, Tara, I'll never go hungry again. And man, that moment stuck with me as a kid, because when I was 30 years old, or 31 years old, and I'd been laid off from my travel industry job where I was a high-profile concierge, and I had had just like crazy year. My 30th year was crazy, but and I moved back home to Montrose, Colorado from Fort Collins, which is a huge culture shift, and everything was locked down. And I looked out and I looked at my farm and I was like, oh man, I'm never gonna go hungry again. So even though everything was shut down, I went and got a job at a hog farm. Why did I get a job at a hog farm? Well, I just needed to make money. So I went and worked at a hog farm called Happy Hogs. George Burkhart, he's a veteran, he's great. You can meet him at the farmer's market. He's great. But I worked for George, and I went and I learned about his process, and he buys baby pigs from somebody who raises pigs. He buys whatever chickens from people drop off chickens all the time. So his egg-laying birds are like the most beautiful menagerie flock ever. but he buys them from local people. He buys his pigs from local people, and then he buys his feed from local people. And so from Olathe Ag. And so everything within his animal's life is within, 40 miles of where his farm is. And then he goes and he sells food through a CSA to people within 40 miles of his farm. And that money goes back into businesses within 40 miles of his farm. So his impact within that 40 miles of the farm, all those dollars stay within 40 miles of his farm. Which means that the ecosystem within 40 miles of his farm is way healthier. And you can make that impact too if you just by supporting a farmer rancher that's a little bit closer to you, because farmers care about their communities. We saw that in the next generation. And so that's how you can, if you just go and buy something from a local farmer, you're helping that process. Thank you for coming to my TED Talk about what I'm doing. But in the Sparks Notes version, if that was a too long story, it strengthens local economy, it increases the nutritional and flavor value of your food, it lessens your environmental impact, it's a safer food system. Because again, during the pandemic, we experienced the reality of what food shortages are, and that was, here in Montrose, we have farmers and ranchers. Again, it's our biggest industry, is agriculture, right? So food wasn't that hard for us to access. There's a woman who works in my office with me who's living in Los Angeles. And she said it was like wartime for them to access food. They had to stand in lines to go into a grocery store, and everything on the shelves was carefully handed out to them so that nobody got too much. It was rationed, and everything was rationed. And we were lucky enough to live in a community that allowed us to just freely go into a grocery store wearing a mask or not, right? We had access to bounty because of that. But we have a much safer food system here because we have local food and local agriculture. And it also increases a sense of place, right? Food is better when it's local, and who doesn't love green chili, right? Colorado loves green chili, right? So we develop those things, or we develop the sweet corn. We take pride in those things, and it creates a sense of community within us to have specialty foods like those things. There's programs and partners if you're interested in getting involved. Obviously, Valley Partnership is who I represent, and we do things like this, as well as the Stone Soup event last week, where we fed over 350 people in the community for free, because eating together brings communities together and builds bridges with people. There's the Chaminade Conservation District, who is finally, since the 40s, getting a brand new logo, but this is not it yet. The Conservation District is a huge way for you to get involved. It is community-led, and the only reason that NRCS and other organizations are allowed to help us build engineering projects and conservation projects is because the conservation districts allow them to. Because when NRCS and those organizations were getting developed, the conservation districts already existed. And so if you want change and you want to see better conservation efforts done in your communities, don't go directly to NRCS, go to your conservation district, because they dictate what NRCS does. NRCS is a great office, and if you have farmland and you're interested in developing a project to be better on water, or to be better on soil health, or to just manage the land you have, there are wonderful agents who are very understaffed in the office here in Montrose, but there's also one in Delta as well. CDA has tons of resources on their website. I highly suggest you going to look at them. And if you have anybody in your life who's interested in being a farmer, they have some wonderful resources for beginning farmer ranchers, and they have people that you can actually talk to on the phone, which is awesome. We have a wonderful state who does care about that. And our Commissioner of Agriculture is from the Western Slope, so she understands what it means to be in a rural environment and not have the help you need. We have CSU Extension. We're lucky enough to have Tri-River Extension here. Katie Alexander is our small acreage agent for that, but Ann Duncan is also great. If any of you are interested in learning to preserve food, growing your own food, and then preserving it through, there's canning classes. There's ways for you to start learning about systems, food systems. CSU Extension is a huge resource that we have easy access to here in Montrose. So these are some of the partners in agriculture that you can get involved with. There's also other ways. Support your local farmer rancher. If you have the ability to purchase a half of an animal for your beef or your pork, or if you wanted to buy a whole chicken, there's farmers and ranchers that can do that in the valley. There's the farmers market. Winter hours will start not this Saturday, but the next Saturday, 10 a.m. to 1 in Centennial Plaza. Again, we're year-round. Tell your local policymakers that agricultural land is important, should be protected, and accessible to farmers and ranchers. Not looking at anybody else in the room. Take part in the Montrose County Fair. How many of you guys know that our county fair, why our county fair doesn't have a carnival with it? Our Montrose County does not allow for us to have a carnival at our fair, unlike the Grand Junction Fair, unlike Delta and Hotchkiss, because the Montrose County Fair, in its bylaws, is dedicated to supporting the agriculture and bounty of our communities. And it wants the agriculture to be the highlight of the fair, not the carnival or drinking or anything like that. And that started way back when Judge Gray, who owned the original land, gave the land to Montrose County. So if you ever wonder why we don't sell booze on the properties, because Judge Gray, a long time ago, was a stanch abolitionist, or not abolitionist, but also he was against alcohol. And so when he gave the land to Montrose County, was like, you can never sell alcohol on Montrose County Fairgrounds. So we don't. That's why we have the new beer garden, because it's not on the original Gray land. So it's another weird agricultural story about why we have fairgrounds. And why being a fifth generation farmer rancher gives you all the tea on that. But the Montrose County Fair is wonderful. It's near Founders Day, and it is the last weekend in July. It is also an ability for you to connect with all the wonderful bounty of our community, so you can engage in our open show, which I will say I have been the superintendent for, but it's a great way for you to show off your art, your cooking. If you have a grandkid who loves Legos, we have a huge Lego contest. Like, those are all, we all have the ability to share all those fun things because we have agriculture in our valley. And again, we interact with our dentists and our doctors, hopefully once, twice a year. But we engage with a farmer 3 times a day when we eat every meal. So, in a way to say thank you, we have a county fair for those people to have a celebration once a year. So those are ways you can engage. These are simple acts that you can input into your normal everyday life. And I just want to say thank you for your support. And I'll open myself up to questions now.
Wow. That was amazing. You took us down more roads than I could have ever imagined. All the history. So, okay, who has questions? Thanks, Jim.
You are a wealth of information. I agree with you. My head is spinning at the top. That's not what I expected to hear today. Thank you. I'm just curious that, most people shop at one of the 4 big places in town, Walmart, Safeway, and I wonder how much of the local farm produce ends up in those markets.
Well, luckily, in Montrose, I would say luckily we do quite a bit, because we do have Tuxedo Corn, which is not just the Harold's family. They're actually a co-op of several local families. And they have a wholesale contract with Kroger and with Walmart. And so they can we actually get a lot of onions and corn and beans, dried beans, from locally in at least the Kroger establishments and in Walmart. Outside of that, you really need to look for a Colorado Proud sticker if you can. It's the big C and it'll say Colorado Proud. Those will at least be within the Colorado. Will have been grown within Colorado, so it will have a much smaller impact, but not all Colorado Proud products originated in Colorado if they're a value-added good. So like something like honey, or, well, not honey, but hot sauces and jams and jellies, they might have imported the things to go into those things, but they were processed in Colorado. There's, I would say it also depends on the season. Because again, if we're eating seasonally, at the height of a season, you're more likely to get a locally grown cantaloupe, like Hale's cantaloupes, which are no relation to me, are grown all throughout the San Luis Valley, as well as southern Colorado, and they have a ton of stuff. I apologize, my computer just went off. So it really depends, but if you're looking for local food in the big stores, look for the Colorado Proud sticker, or it is federal law to have where it's grown, so you can usually see at least the state it's grown in. But we're lucky enough to have 2 big wholesalers. If you would like to see more of that, is you can encourage CBA, USDA, and your local governments to provide funding opportunities for groups to develop wholesale opportunities for their farms. And that's one of the initiatives Valley for Partnership does for CBA, is we actually try to train farmers and ranchers how to get into wholesale so we can provide more things in that area.
And the reason I asked that question is I know that there are several of our area farmers are under contract, and they sell their entire product.
Yep.
And it's sold out of Montrose.
Yes. So, and that's, a lot of agriculturalists are exporting most of their things. So the Fields family is one of the largest sheep producers in the area. They export all of their lamb. We should eat a ton of lamb here. We don't because of World War II, and that's a huge digression. But it's more economical for him to export his lamb overseas through JBS than it is for him to sell it to a local producer, because we don't have the facilities to process that many lamb here in the area.
Yeah, it's more than just the growing and the selling, it's the processing.
Yes.
That comes in between.
And the packing sheds.
I'm interested in the no-till farming. I grew up on a farm where we had to plow every year. So the picture showed the planter with a mixture of grasses and weeds and whatever. Is that where they're going to put seed into that?
Let me go back. No, just it. So this is where they're going to put it in. It's kind of behind it. But yes, ideally you're not in no-till, and there are different levels of no-till. You would cover crop in the seed. So usually no-till, there's a couple of different ways that no-till can be done. You can do a partial till. So if you have a bunch of Russian knapweed or Canadian thistle and things like that, you can go in and till in rows like you would, and then you could go and do a no-till over that to put in a fast-growing crop that would hopefully choke out those weeds. But a weed is just a plant that is growing where you don't want it to grow. So anything can be a weed. And in holistic management, we try to just work towards what we want and not try to address things we don't like. So instead of putting pesticides, herbicide on there, although those are tools you can use, you would go in and try to seed in something different. For the small till, a lot of people who have orchards or like the hops farm, because they have a limited space, they'll take the till between their rows of trees or poles, and they'll till in grasses, or if they have compacted soil, they'll even till in things like radishes or root vegetables that will break up the ground and create a natural decompaction with root vegetables. And then they leave those in there so that the nutrients go back to the soil, or they'll bring in cattle or other hoofed animals to graze on that cover crop.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions?
Is there any, sorry,
Oh, it's fine.
is there
Okay.
any, a system for local foods to get into the school systems here?
Oh, yeah. So, schools are great. If getting local food is important to you, and getting local food into your school system is important to you, then please go talk to your school board about it, because they renew their contract, not annually, with Cisco and their other programs. The biggest issue we have right now is creating facilities in our schools to actually process food. Because what has happened over the years is with other groups like Cisco who bring in pre-made meals, we basically only have like ovens or heating units. There's no facilities to actually process the local food that can be brought in. Delta County actually has an amazing local food system. They bake all their own bread. Most of their food is actually locally sourced because they have a food system where they can process and they can save things that are brought in. So it can be done to make school food mostly locally sourced, but you have to have facilities in your schools to do that. So one of the things you can do is go to your school board and be like, we'd love to invest in making facilities for that to happen. Well, then that creates legislature, and that gets you civically involved, but that is how we bring local food into those systems. And entrepreneurship has been part of that conversation, and we want to continue that conversation, but it's more, at this point, it's getting the community to be engaged with that initiative at this point.
Anybody else?
Do you know anything about the chocolate factory, what happened to that? And also,
I used to refer to the Russell factory as my white whale, because I had, after my mother left politics, she went into economic development, so I grew up also learning about economic development, and I was like, this building with its football-sized freezer space could be made into a IQF fruit processing facility. So we could invest in a business that brought in IQF is instant quick freeze. So it would instantly quick freeze all of the nutritional value in that food. But we would need those skilled food workers to come in and peel and chop into not like fully processed, but halfway processed food. Great things like half of apples and peaches and things like that, and freeze them, and then those could be packaged in that facility and then brought out through train to all the school districts. That was my big vision. I have this big vision for that. And there was some momentum about 5 years ago for that to happen before the pandemic. Unfortunately, the cost of that building, it cost $10,000 a month just to keep the lights on and keep the freezer going in that building. And I think over time, especially with the pandemic, it was really hard to bring in prospective buyers. And one of the ways for that building to get that kind of initiative, and I think the community at the time, we had a lot of other things to focus on, were interested in. And so I don't know all the logistics of it. I just know that at this time, they have been sold to somebody. I believe that they're going to dismantle the building. And they'll build something that I think will be really wonderful at the middle of town. Because again, when that building was built, it was at the end of town. And then we kind of grew past it. And so there's been a lot of talk about there being a meat processing facility. Well, I don't think Montrose wants a meat processing facility in the center of town. It takes a lot of water, it takes a lot of power, and if anybody has been to Greeley, it does take a smell toll on its population. So, but It is a shame that it didn't come into be my white whale of a building and we don't have that industry. But if that's something people are interested in, tell people like MEDC, Montrose Development, or Economic Development. Sandy Head, if that's important to you to see a food processing facility brought into Montrose, tell her. Go tell your county commissioners that. Go tell your city planners that. Go tell your city council that. Because a building like that could process produce would actually be a huge boon to Montrose economically. Economically, it would bring in millions of dollars of revenue. And I say revenue because, again, there's profit. There's a difference between profit and revenue. But it could actually allow, the biggest thing we've seen right now is that farmers and ranchers today don't have the capacity to actually grow bigger in their businesses because we don't have the processors to accept that. Kinnikin is amazing and wonderful, but they need a freezer. They're running out of freezer space as it is, and they need to expand into more freezer space for them to expand, which would allow for meat producers to expand. Or we need a different meat processing facility that actually allows for people to grow. Fruit is the same way. Our packing sheds are at capacity. If we had a larger outlet for that, we would be able to grow that. How many of you guys remember the hemp boom, right? Right? Everybody transitions their fields to hemp. The reason why the hemp boom did not continue was because there was no industry to accept the byproduct of the hemp industry, because the hemp industry makes a ton of fiber. So if somebody had come in and developed a fabric manufacturing facility to make hemp fabrics are some of the most breathable, wonderful fabrics in the world. It's also way less, it requires way less water than cotton, and it's pretty renewable, but it goes into a ton of other things. We could have made hemp rope, we could have made hemp, there's even hemp like bowls and things like that. But at the time, nobody thought about building in that industry of that next phase of food systems. And so because of that, we have 20 tons of hemp fiber just rotting in Delta at the food co-op. So if you're interested in developing agriculture, bring people together and talking about, okay, great, how do we build the industry of agriculture to make our farmers successful? And that's kind of if that's important to you, those are things you should be telling your local people about.
Thank you, and sorry, Clay, but we are out of time.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Look at that clock, please, take